Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God, with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
Where we dive deep into the most electrifying, high-stakes moments unfolding behind the closed doors of power. Today, we are unpacking an ideological collision on Capitol Hill that goes straight to the very foundation of the United States of America. This is not just another mundane bureaucratic hearing. This is a profound philosophical battle over where your rights actually come from. Are your freedoms granted to you by a group of politicians sitting in a legislative chamber? Or are they unalienable, granted by a higher power at the moment of your birth? In a recent intense committee hearing, this exact question ignited a massive fireworks display between Senator Tim Kaine, Senator Ted Cruz, and State Department officials. Grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let us dissect the astonishing transcript of this confrontation, piece by piece. The atmosphere in the room was already charged when Senator Tim Kaine took the microphone. He directed his immediate attention to Mr. Barnes, a key figure testifying before the committee, focusing heavily on the opening statements that had just been delivered to the record. Senator Kaine was notably perturbed by a specific theological and political philosophy that Mr. Barnes had presented. Kaine stated that he was struck by the opening comments and specifically asked to get a copy of them so he could read them and make sure he quoted them correctly. The source of Kaine's concern was a direct quotation from Secretary Rubio that Barnes had included in his testimony. You state, and this is a quote from Secretary Rubio, "Our rights come from God, our Creator, not from our laws, not from our governments." For many Americans, this sentiment might sound incredibly familiar, perhaps echoing the very documents that birthed the nation. However, for Senator Kaine, this assertion was a massive red flag. Kaine explicitly told Mr. Barnes that he found that specific philosophy very, very troubling. To build his case, Senator Kaine leaned heavily into his own personal background and religious experiences. He wanted to make it absolutely clear that his objections were not born out of a hostility toward religion itself. He noted to the committee that he is a devout person who had previously served as a missionary in Honduras. He also gestured to the diversity of the room, acknowledging that there were other devout folks present, including Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and American individuals. Despite this deep respect for personal faith, Kaine argued that weaving this specific theology into the fabric of government policy is incredibly dangerous. He drew a stark and chilling comparison to make his point. He argued that the notion that rights do not come from laws and do not come from the government, but rather come from the Creator, is exactly what the Iranian government believes. This was a heavy accusation, effectively comparing an American diplomatic philosophy to a notorious authoritarian state. He elaborated that Iran is a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and systematically targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. According to Kaine, the Iranian government commits these oppressive acts precisely because they believe that they perfectly understand what natural rights are from their Creator. Therefore, he reiterated, the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling to him. Senator Kaine then transitioned his argument to the sanctity of the American legal system. He reminded the room that the motto carved over the Supreme Court is equal justice under law. Furthermore, he pointed out that the oath that he, Mr. Barnes, and other officials take is a pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not a set of arbitrarily defined natural rights. Kaine conceded that while he is a strong believer in natural rights, he suspects that if people with different religious traditions were put around a table, there would be some significant differences in how those natural rights are defined. He referenced Barnes's testimony again, noting Barnes's belief that our country and our government is the best in the world, and our strength comes from our enduring values. Kaine agreed with that sentiment, but Kaine took immense issue with Barnes's assertion that these values are not an endless list of so-called rights that people create and change to meet their own needs or desires. Barnes had argued that these values are not identity politics, but rather the historic natural rights that we have as individuals pursuing life, liberty, and happiness. This philosophical debate then violently collided with a highly controversial mystery document, the State Department's annual Human Rights Report. Kaine used Barnes's mention of pursuing life, liberty, and happiness as a pivot to interrogate a massive and sudden change in official government documentation. Kaine revealed the shocking claim that the State Department's Human Rights Report had just struck out all references to the rights of LGBTQ people in foreign countries and the specific ways those countries treat LGBTQ individuals. He passionately asked the committee if these individuals have a right to liberty, a right to life, or a right to happiness. Adding fuel to the fire, Kaine referenced Senator Murphy, who had previously pointed out that the Human Rights Report had also bizarrely taken out critical information regarding freedom of association, freedom of expression, the exploitation of children, and prison conditions. For decades, human rights advocates have relied on these metrics. Kaine emphasized that these issues were all part of the human rights reports that had been consistently done for years by the State Department. He argued fiercely that these exact issues are intrinsically connected to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet, according to Kaine, they have now all been removed from the State Department's annual Human Rights Report. He completely dismissed any bureaucratic excuses for these deletions, stating that the notion that the department merely wanted to make the report shorter or more readable just does not pass the laugh test with him and many others on the committee. Kaine clarified that he was not trying to attack Mr. Barnes personally. He stated that he believed Barnes offered his testimony in a very sincere way, and that he did not want to try to change Barnes's opinion on something he sincerely believes. However, Kaine doubled down on his core legal philosophy. He argued that the notion that our rights do not come from our laws or our government should make people very, very nervous, because people of any religious tradition, or no religious tradition at all, are entitled to the equal protection of the laws under the 14th Amendment. He stressed that it should not matter what a person's religious background is, what they think about God or the Creator, or what their church affiliation might be. In this country, every single person is entitled to the equal protection of the laws. Consequently, Kaine argued that to demean laws and demean governments, and to suggest that rights do not come from laws and governments, is a fundamentally flawed approach. While Kaine repeated that he thinks there are such things as natural rights, and he tries to live in accord with them, he firmly stated he would never demean the law, because we are a nation of laws, not men, and law is not people. He warned that if, after nearly 250 years, the United States suddenly starts to demean or diminish the law and suggests it is all about natural rights as defined by a leader, like the leader of Iran or the leader of any nation that does not create a place of safety or comfort for folks, we are heading down a dark path. Briefly stepping away from this intense philosophical crossfire, Kaine turned his attention to Mr. Wilcox to address urgent logistical and security concerns. He noted that Wilcox holds a very important position, managing what might be the largest group of employees within the State Department in Virginia. Kaine highlighted that all the Marine security guards who guard our embassies train at Quantico, and mentioned the Foreign Affairs Security Training Centers at Fort Barfoot in Southern Virginia that train State Department personnel to keep themselves and their families safe. Kaine expressed that he is a little bit worried about the effect of the massive reductions in force, or RIFs, in the State Department on the vital security mission. He asked Wilcox how he would try to make sure that his division has the resources it needs to get the job done. After Wilcox politely apologized and asked the senator to repeat the question, Kaine reiterated his worry about the RIFs, the reductions in force, and the effect of those RIFs on the security mission of the Department of State. He asked Wilcox to explain how he would work to ensure they have the resources needed to make sure security is job one. Wilcox appreciated the question and briefly responded that diplomatic security was not as impacted. But the brief bureaucratic interlude was over. The ideological storm was about to reach a fever pitch. Enter Senator Ted Cruz. Cruz, clearly astounded by the arguments he had just heard, took the floor and immediately stated he would like to go back to the exchange Barnes had with Senator Kaine, expressing his wish that Senator Kaine was still present in the room. Cruz offered a brief history, noting that he and Senator Kaine were elected together 13 years ago, and that Kaine is a friend. But friendship did not stop Cruz from launching a devastating critique. Cruz actually encouraged observers to go back and listen to what Senator Kaine said, because Cruz stated that he found it disturbing and believed it showed much of where today's Democrat Party has gone wrong. Cruz meticulously dismantled Kaine's entire premise. He pointed out that Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. Cruz painted a vivid picture of his own reaction to Kaine's words, revealing that he had just walked into the hearing as Kaine was saying that, and he almost fell out of his chair. Why was Cruz so shocked? Because according to Cruz, that radical and dangerous notion, in Kaine's own words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. To deliver the ultimate mic drop, Cruz did not rely on his own opinions. He brought the ultimate piece of historical evidence to the table. He told Mr. Barnes that if people do not believe him, they can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, not by government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God, with certain unalienable rights that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Cruz used this legendary quote to obliterate Kaine's legalistic argument. He declared that it is absolutely stunning to him that the principle that God has given us natural rights is now deemed by Democrats as some radical and dangerous notion. Cruz then brilliantly turned Kaine's nation of laws argument on its head by bringing up the darkest chapter in American history. Cruz stated definitively that Mr. Jefferson was right when he wrote those words, and that government exists solely to protect those rights. Furthermore, Cruz pointed out that slavery was not okay when U.S. law allowed it, asserting that it was wrong then, it is wrong now, and it is always wrong. This was a powerful counterargument. If rights come only from the government and the law, then when the law permitted the horrific practice of slavery, the victims technically had no rights to violate. It is only through the lens of God-given natural rights that unjust laws can be successfully challenged and overturned. Cruz then directly challenged Mr. Barnes, asking him if he agreed with what Cruz had just said, considering Barnes's role is designed to defend human rights across the globe. He pressed Barnes further, asking him what he thinks about the concept that the founding principles of America are radical and dangerous. He demanded to know what Barnes thought about that particular notion. Barnes, caught in the crossfire of this monumental historical and political clash, attempted to navigate a diplomatic middle ground. He appreciated the senator's question. Barnes responded by bringing up structural changes within the department, stating that one of the ideas behind the reorganization is that they have a new office in DRL, the Office of Natural Rights. Seeking to diffuse the tension and defend the concept of natural rights without unnecessarily antagonizing the other side of the aisle, Barnes suggested that one of the ideas behind that new office is that you actually have the most consensus behind these natural rights, rather than the kind of hot-button issues of the day. He concluded his thoughts by stating that we should champion those rights, as Senator Kaine had also mentioned. This incredible hearing provided a rare, unfiltered look into the deep ideological divides that shape American foreign and domestic policy. On one side, the belief that rights are a legal construct, protected by governments and vulnerable to theocratic misinterpretation. On the other, the foundational American creed that rights are divine, unalienable, and supreme over any law a government could ever pass. Let us know in the comments below. Do your rights come from the Constitution and the laws of the land? Or do they come from a higher power, as written in the Declaration of Independence?